Captain Jake Morrison stared at the radar screen in disbelief. 12 massive objects had appeared near Jupiter, each one bigger than any ship humans had ever built. The year was 2157, and humanity had just met their first aliens. "Sir, there?" "Sending a message," said Lieutenant Amy Torres from her station. Her voice was tight with fear. Jake nodded. "Put it through." The main screen flickered, and a face appeared that would haunt Jake's nightmares for years to come. The alien looked like a giant lizard walking on 2 legs. Its scales were dark green, and its yellow eyes showed no emotion at all. When it spoke, its voice was cold and mechanical. "I am Commander HFY of the Galactic Hegemony. Your species will surrender immediately. You will become servants of the Empire. This is not a request." Jake stood up straight. Even though his hands were shaking, he kept his voice steady. "This is Captain Morrison of the Earth Defense Force. We don't surrender to anyone. If you want to talk, we can talk. But we won't be your slaves." The alien's mouth opened, showing rows of sharp teeth. It was laughing, but the sound was horrible. "Slaves? You misunderstand, human. Slaves have value. You are less than that. You are simply another species that will serve the greater good of the galaxy." Back on Earth, Dr. Lisa Grant was watching the conversation from the command center in Geneva. She had spent her whole life studying the possibility of alien life. Now that it was here, she wished it had never happened. "They don't see us as equals," she whispered to Admiral Ben Carter, who stood beside her. "To them, we're just animals that learn to use tools." Admiral Carter was a tough man who had fought in 3 wars. But even he felt cold fear creeping up his spine. "How many ships do they have?" "Our long-range sensors show at least 50 vessels," replied Dr. Rachel Kim from her computer station. "And those are just the ones we can see. Their technology is far beyond ours." On the alien flagship, Commander HFY was speaking with his second-in-command, a creature that looked like it was made of living crystal. This was Zethkar, a being from a race that had been conquered by the hegemony 300 years ago. "The humans refused to surrender," HFY said. "This is unusual. Most species accept their fate when they see our fleet." Zethkar's crystal body glowed softly as he thought. "Perhaps they do not understand their situation. Their technology is primitive. Their weapons cannot even scratch our shields." "Then we will show them," HFY decided. "Begin the demonstration." 3 hegemony ships moved toward Earth's moon. The human lunar colonies had about 50,000 people living and working there. They were miners, scientists, and their families. They had no way to defend themselves. Lieutenant Commander Amy Torres was commanding the small defense station on Luna when the alien ships arrived. She had 6 patrol boats and 30 crew members. Against the massive alien vessels, they looked like toys. She opened a channel to all the patrol boats. "This is Torres. We're going to buy the civilians time to evacuate. I know we can't win, but we can show these aliens that humans don't give up without a fight." The patrol boats launched their missiles at the alien ships. The weapons exploded harmlessly against the energy shields that surrounded the vessels. The aliens didn't even bother to return fire at first. They just watched as the humans threw everything they had at them. Then one alien ship fired a single beam of red light. It cut through 3 patrol boats like they were made of paper. Amy watched her friends die in seconds, but the humans kept fighting. The remaining patrol boats kept attacking, even though they knew it was hopeless. This confused the aliens. Every other species had stopped fighting once they saw how outmatched they were. On Earth, Paul Davis was working frantically in his laboratory. He was trying to understand a piece of alien technology that had fallen from one of their scout ships. The metal was unlike anything he had ever seen. It seemed to change its properties based on what was touching it. "Lisa, come look at this," he called to Dr. Grant. "This material responds to electrical impulses, but not in any way that makes sense according to our physics." Dr. Grant studied the readings. "It's like it's alive somehow, but that's impossible." Outside, the sky was filled with alien ships. They blotted out the sun over major cities. New York, London, Tokyo, and Moscow all reported the same thing. Giant vessels hovering overhead, waiting. The alien ultimatum came at exactly noon, Greenwich. Meantime, every television, radio, and internet connection on Earth carried the same message. Commander Keshai's face appeared everywhere. "Humans of Earth, you have seen our power. Your moon colonies are destroyed. Your military is nothing compared to our forces. You have 1 hour to surrender completely. If you refuse, we will begin destroying your cities. Your leaders will be executed. Your population will be relocated to work camps throughout the galaxy. This is your only warning." In the command center, Admiral Carter looked at the faces around him. These were the best military minds humanity had to offer. They all knew the situation was hopeless. "We have reports of hegemony ships over every major population center," said Colonel Tony Adams. "They could kill millions with a single attack. What are our options?" Asked President Maria Santos, who had just arrived by emergency transport. Admiral Carter's voice was heavy. "We have none. If we fight, they'll destroy our cities. If we surrender, they'll make us slaves. Either way, humanity as we know it is finished." Dr. Grant stepped forward. "Maybe not. I've been studying their behavior. They're not just conquerors. They're collectors. They want to preserve species, not destroy them. That means they need us alive as slaves," pointed out Admiral Carter. "Yes, but alive. And as long as humans are alive, there's hope." The hour passed quickly. As promised, the aliens began their attack. But instead of destroying the cities completely, they targeted military bases, government buildings, and communication centers. They were being surgical, precise. They wanted to cripple humanity's ability to fight back without killing everyone. Jake Morrison watched from orbit as his home planet was conquered in a matter of hours. The alien ships landed in every major city. Troops poured out, not just the lizard-like Vorthans, but other species too. Some looked like giant insects. Others were humanoid but covered in fur or scales. By the end of the day, Earth's government had officially surrendered. The planet's 7 billion people were now subjects of the galactic hegemony. Transport ships began landing to take humans to other worlds. As Jake was led away in chains, he heard Commander Keshai speaking to another alien officer. "This species is different," the commander said. "They fought even when they knew they could not win. Most curious. Should we be concerned?" asked the other alien. Keshai laughed his horrible laugh. "Concerned? About these primitives? In 6 months, they will be broken like all the others. The human spirit you observed is nothing more than ignorance of their place in the galaxy." But as Jake was pushed into the transport ship, he caught the eye of Amy Torres, who was also being taken prisoner. They shared a look that said everything. This wasn't over. Somehow, someday, humanity would be free again. The ship's doors closed, and Earth grew smaller behind them. The first chapter in humanity's greatest challenge was ending, but the real story was just beginning. 3 years had passed since the hegemony conquered Earth. Carlos Rodriguez wiped the sweat from his forehead as he worked in the mining tunnels of Kepler 442b. The planet was hot, dusty, and far from home. But it had become home for thousands of human workers who had been shipped here after the conquest. Carlos had been a NASA engineer before the invasion. Now he spent his days digging rare metals from alien rock. But his real work happened after hours, when the alien guards weren't watching. Pass it along quietly. He whispered to the human worker next to him. "Meeting tonight in Tunnel 7. Tell Lucy and Ryan." The worker nodded and kept digging. This was how information traveled among the human prisoners. Slowly, carefully, and always in secret. That night, 15 humans gathered in the abandoned mining tunnel. Carlos had chosen this spot because the alien sensors couldn't detect them here. The metal in the walls blocked their signals. Lucy Barnes used to be a sergeant in the Marine Corps. Even in prisoner clothes, she still carried herself like a soldier. "What's the situation, Carlos?" "I've been studying their equipment," Carlos said, holding up a small device he had built from stolen parts. "The aliens are using technology we don't understand, but I'm starting to see patterns." Ryan Clark had been a business executive before the war. He was good at organizing people and resources. "How many humans are on this planet now?" he asked. "About 12,000, replied Lucy. "Spread across 47 work sites. Most are in mining operations like this one." Carlos activated his device. A holographic map appeared, showing the planet's surface. "The interesting thing is what the aliens aren't doing. They're not trying to break our spirits like they did with other species. They're just keeping us busy." "Maybe they don't think we're dangerous enough to worry about," suggested Helen Foster. She had been a research scientist on Earth and was now forced to work in an alien laboratory. "That might be their mistake," said Carlos. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Jack Palmer was hiding in the ruins of New York City. The former Special Forces operator had been leading a small resistance group for 2 years. They lived in the subway tunnels and abandoned buildings, striking at alien patrols when they could. Jack's group had discovered something important. The aliens had left most of Earth's technology intact. They seemed to think human machines were too primitive to be useful. This was a big mistake. "Show me what you found," Jack said to Danny Rodriguez, a young engineer who had joined the resistance. Danny pulled out pieces of alien equipment. "I took these from a crashed patrol ship. Look at this power source. It's incredibly advanced, but the way it connects to their systems is actually pretty simple." Jack studied the alien technology. He had no formal engineering training, but years of working with military equipment had taught him how machines worked. "Can we use this?" "I think so. If we can figure out how to connect it to our weapons, we might actually have something that can hurt them." On Kepler 442b, Carlos was making his own discoveries. The aliens had put him to work maintaining their mining equipment. They thought this was safe because the machines were so advanced that humans couldn't possibly understand them. They were wrong. "It's not magic," Carlos explained to his secret meeting that night. "Their technology follows rules, just like ours does. The rules are different, but they're still rules." Helen Foster had been studying the aliens themselves. "I've been watching our guards. The Vorthans, the crystal beings, the insect ones. They all think in very rigid ways. When something unexpected happens, it takes them a long time to figure out how to respond." "What do you mean?" asked Lucy. "Last week, there was a cave-in in Tunnel 12. The human workers immediately started digging out the trapped miners. They worked together without being told what to do. The alien supervisors just stood there for almost an hour, waiting for orders from their commanders." Ryan Clark leaned forward. "Are you saying they can't think for themselves?" "I'm saying they're not used to situations that change quickly. Their empire has been stable for thousands of years. They don't know how to deal with chaos." This gave Carlos an idea. What if we created some chaos? The plan they developed was simple but clever. The humans would start making small mistakes in their work. Nothing big enough to get them punished, but enough to disrupt the alien operations. A machine would break down here. A shipment would be delayed there. A computer system would glitch somewhere else. The aliens noticed the problems, but they couldn't figure out what was causing them. The equipment failures seemed random. The human workers appeared to be trying their best, but somehow productivity kept dropping. On other worlds, human prisoners were starting similar campaigns. Amy Torres had been sent to an agricultural planet where humans worked in massive food production facilities. She organized the workers to reduce output by just a few % each month. The aliens noticed something was wrong, but they couldn't prove the humans were doing it on purpose. Jake Morrison was on a construction world, building structures for the hegemony. He and his fellow prisoners started introducing tiny flaws into their work. A support beam would be slightly weaker than it should be. A foundation would have small cracks. None of these problems would cause immediate failures, but over time, the buildings would not last as long as they were supposed to. The aliens were getting frustrated. They had conquered 847 worlds before Earth, and they had never seen anything like this. Other species either fought desperately and were destroyed, or they accepted their fate and became obedient servants. Humans seemed to be doing something else entirely. Commander Keshai was reviewing reports from dozens of worlds with human populations. The data made no sense. Human workers were not rebelling openly, but their performance was declining across the Empire. Perhaps the species is simply inferior, suggested Zethkar. Their intelligence may not be sufficient for the tasks we have assigned them. No, said Keshai. I observed them during the conquest. They are not stupid. They are doing this deliberately. But why? What do they hope to accomplish? They cannot defeat us with minor sabotage. Keshai didn't have an answer. In his 3 centuries of military service, he had never encountered a species that behaved like this. Back on Kepler 442b, Carlos had made a breakthrough. He had figured out how to modify alien mining equipment to work more efficiently. But instead of reporting this to his supervisors, he shared the knowledge with other human workers. If we can understand their technology, he told the secret meeting, we can do more than just break it. We can improve it. Helen Foster had been thinking about this too. The aliens see us as primitive, but we're not. We're different. We solve problems in ways they never considered. What kind of ways? Asked Lucy. They design everything to work perfectly in ideal conditions. But we're used to things going wrong. We're used to having to fix problems with whatever materials we have available. We're used to adapting. Ryan Clark was excited. So we're naturally better at dealing with unexpected situations. Exactly. And their empire is built on predictability. Everything has its place. Everyone knows their role, and nothing ever changes. Carlos smiled. Then let's give them some changes they weren't expecting. The resistance began to spread beyond individual worlds. Humans started communicating with each other across the galaxy. They used the aliens' own communication systems, hiding messages in routine work reports and maintenance schedules. The network grew slowly, but steadily. A mining engineer on one world would share a technological insight with a construction worker. On another, a farmer would pass along information about alien weak points to a factory worker in a different star system. The aliens began to realize they had a problem. Human productivity wasn't just declining. Humans were starting to outperform their own estimates in some areas while failing completely in others. It was as if the humans were choosing what to succeed at and what to fail at. This is impossible, said Zethkar. No conquered species has ever shown this level of coordination. They are planning something, agreed Keshai. But what? Answer came sooner than expected. On a shipbuilding world, human workers had been secretly modifying the vessels they were constructing. The changes were subtle but significant. The ships were actually better than the original designs, but they had hidden weaknesses that only humans knew about. When the first modified ship was tested in combat, it performed brilliantly, until the human prisoners activated the hidden flaws remotely. The ship's systems failed at exactly the wrong moment. and it was destroyed by a much smaller opponent. The aliens finally understood. Humans weren't just resisting, they were learning. They were studying alien technology, improving it, and then using that knowledge against their captors. How is this possible? Demanded the Hegemony High Council when they received the reports. The humans appeared to have an unusual capacity for innovation, reported the investigation team. They see problems as puzzles to be solved, rather than obstacles to be avoided. And they share information freely among themselves, even across different worlds and work assignments. This behavior is unprecedented in our experience. Sarah Mitchell floated in the command center of the hidden asteroid base, watching dozens of screens showing battles across the galaxy. 5 years had passed since Earth's conquest, and the human resistance had grown into something the hegemony had never faced before. "Report from the Vega system," called out Lieutenant Mike Chun from his station. Tony's team successfully destroyed the shipyard. 3 hegemony cruisers were under construction. They're gone now. Sarah nodded grimly. Colonel Tony Adams had been leading increasingly bold attacks against alien facilities. His latest mission had been the most dangerous yet, but also the most successful. "Any word from the science team?" Sarah asked. "Amanda's group is still working on the new drive system," replied Captain Nicole Roberts. "But she says they're close to a breakthrough." Dr. Amanda Wells was working in a secret laboratory hidden in the outer planets of the Centauri system. Her team had been studying captured alien technology for months, trying to understand how their faster-than-light travel worked. "The principle is actually quite simple," Amanda explained to her team. "The aliens use quantum fields to fold space-time, but they do it in a very inefficient way." Her assistant, Dr. Frank Wilson, looked up from his calculations. "Inefficient how?" "They're using brute force. They create a massive field that affects everything around their ship. It works, but it requires enormous amounts of energy." "And you think we can do better?" Amanda smiled. "I know we can. Look at this." She showed him a holographic display of her new design. "Instead of creating one big field, we create hundreds of small ones. Each one is precisely tuned to work with the others. The total energy requirement is actually lower than what the aliens use." "That's impossible," said Dr. Jennifer Moore, another team member. "The aliens have been using this technology for thousands of years. How could we improve on it in just 5 years?" "Because we think differently," Amanda replied. "The aliens see space travel as a problem to be solved with power. We see it as a puzzle to be solved with cleverness." Meanwhile, on the prison world of Keth Prime, something unprecedented was happening. The human prisoners were not just resisting their captors, they were inspiring other species to do the same. Greg Thompson had been a Marine lieutenant colonel before the conquest. Now he was organizing the largest prison break in galactic history. But this wasn't just about humans anymore. "The Melari are ready," reported Lucy Barnes, who had been transferred to this world 6 months ago. "They've been watching how we organize ourselves, and they want to learn." The Melari were a species of small, gray-skinned humanoids who had been conquered by the hegemony 200 years ago. They had been model prisoners until they started working alongside humans. "What about the Vex?" asked Greg. "They're more cautious," Lucy replied. "But their young ones are definitely interested. They keep asking questions about human fighting techniques." The Vex were large, furry creatures who looked like walking bears. They had been conquered 300 years ago and had never shown any signs of rebellion before meeting humans. And the Corvins? They're the most eager of all. They say they've been waiting for someone to show them how to fight back. The Corvins were reptilian like the Vorthans, but smaller and more agile. They had been enslaved for over 400 years and had almost forgotten what freedom felt like. Greg looked around at the mixed group of humans and aliens who had gathered for the planning meeting. "This is bigger than just escaping. If we can coordinate uprisings across multiple species, we can actually threaten a hegemony's control. Back in space, the first battle using human-designed technology was about to begin. Jake Morrison now commanded a small fleet of modified ships. They looked like standard hegemony vessels from the outside, but inside they were completely different. "All ships report ready," said his communications officer, Lieutenant Dave Parker. "Remember," Jake announced over the fleet channel, "we're not just fighting for Earth anymore. We're fighting for every species that's been enslaved by these tyrants." The hegemony patrol fleet they were about to attack consisted of 12 ships. Jake's force had only 6 vessels, but they had advantages the aliens couldn't imagine. "Engage," Jake ordered. The battle that followed shocked everyone who witnessed it. The human ships moved with impossible speed and precision. Their weapons fired in patterns that seemed to violate the laws of physics. They coordinated their attacks in ways that made them seem like a single organism rather than separate vessels. Hegemony ships were destroyed in less than 10 minutes. Not one human vessel was even damaged. How did they do that? Demanded Commander Keshai when he received the battle report. "The human ships used tactics we have never seen before," replied his intelligence officer. "They attacked from multiple angles simultaneously, used their own ships as shields for each other, and somehow predicted exactly where our vessels would be at every moment. That's impossible. Our ship movements are calculated by quantum computers. No organic mind could predict them. Unless the organic mind thinks differently than we assumed." On the prison world, the mass escape was underway. Greg Thompson led. A combined force of humans, Milari, Vex, and Corvins against the hegemony guards. The aliens were completely unprepared for this kind of coordinated attack. "Cover the Milari," shouted Lucy Barnes as she fired a captured alien weapon. "There. Small, but they're fast." The Milari were indeed fast. They swarmed over the alien guards like angry insects, using their size and speed to avoid return fire while delivering precise strikes to vulnerable points. The Vex used their size and strength to tear through barricades and defensive positions. But they also showed surprising tactical intelligence, coordinating their attacks with the smaller species. The Corvins proved to be natural fighters. Their reptilian reflexes and climbing abilities allowed them to attack from unexpected angles, but it was the humans who held everything together. They provided the strategy, the coordination, and the inspiration that turned a diverse group of prisoners into an effective fighting force. "The transport ships are ready," called out Captain Roberts, who had been part of the advance team that captured the prison spacecraft. "Everyone move," ordered Greg. "Humans help the injured aliens. Aliens help the injured humans. We're all in this together now." As the mixed group of former prisoners escaped into space, they carried with them something more valuable than freedom. They carried proof that the hegemony's control could be broken. Word of the successful escape spread quickly through the galaxy's underground networks. Other prison worlds began experiencing their own uprisings. Factory workers started sabotaging production. Mining operations ground to a halt as workers simply refused to work. The hegemony's response was swift and brutal. They began implementing what they called final solutions, the complete elimination of troublesome populations. But this only made things worse for them. When other species saw that the hegemony was willing to commit genocide rather than allow freedom, they realized that cooperation was their only hope for survival. Amanda Wells finally completed her new faster-than-light drive. The first test was conducted in absolute secrecy, far from any hegemony sensors. "Drive activation in 10 seconds, announced her pilot, Captain Steve Lee. The ship vanished from normal space and reappeared 50 light-years away in less than a minute. The journey should have taken a hegemony ship 3 hours. "We're not just faster," Amanda explained to Sarah Mitchell over the secure communication channel. We're completely undetectable while we're in transit. The hegemony sensors can't track us. How many ships can you equip with this technology? As many as we can build. The components are actually simpler than what the aliens use. Any decent engineer can assemble them. Sarah smiled. Then it's time to take this war to the next level. The first major space battle, using the new technology, took place in the Rigel system. A hegemony fleet of 30 ships was protecting a major military installation. The human-led alliance attacked with 15 vessels. The battle was unlike anything in galactic history. Human ships appeared and disappeared at will, striking from impossible angles before vanishing again. Allied forces coordinated attacks across multiple star systems simultaneously, using their new drives to move between battlefields in minutes rather than hours. The hegemony fleet was destroyed completely. Not a single Allied ship was lost. "This is impossible," repeated Commander Keshai as he read the battle reports. "How can a primitive species develop superior technology in just 5 years?" "Perhaps they are not as primitive as we assumed," suggested Zethkar. "Or perhaps we are not as advanced as we thought." The Hegemony High Council convened an emergency session. For the first time in their 3,000-year history, they faced a real threat to their power. "The situation is critical," reported the Military Council. "We are losing territory daily. Entire star systems are declaring independence. Our own member species are joining the rebellion. What do the humans want?" asked the council leader. "Freedom for all enslaved species. The right to govern themselves. The end of the hegemony's empire. And if we refuse?" Nicole Roberts stood on the bridge of the Terran Alliance flagship Freedom's Dawn, watching as another hegemony world surrendered without a fight. 8 years had passed since the conquest of Earth, and everything had changed. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface," reported Communications Officer Lisa Grant. "They're asking to join the Alliance." "What about the hegemony garrison?" Nicole asked. "They've already laid down their weapons. The local population convinced them to surrender peacefully." This was happening more and more often. Hegemony worlds were switching sides without any fighting at all. The alien soldiers weren't being defeated in battle. They were being convinced that there was a better way to live. On the planet's surface, General Kevin Walsh was setting up another Terran academy. These schools had become the most powerful weapon in humanity's arsenal, though they didn't look like weapons at all. "Welcome to the academy," Kevin said to a mixed group of humans and aliens who had gathered for the opening ceremony. "You're here to learn something that no hegemony school has ever taught: how to think for yourself." Among the students was a young Vorthan named Sektar. His father had been a hegemony commander, but Sektar had never understood why the Empire ruled through fear and punishment. "Teacher Walsh," Sektar asked during the first class, "why do humans share their knowledge so freely?" "The hegemony keeps all advanced technology secret from conquered species." Kevin smiled. "Because knowledge becomes more powerful when it's shared, not less. When you teach someone else, you learn something too. When you work together with others, you can solve problems that neither of you could handle alone." This concept was revolutionary to most alien species. The hegemony had taught them that knowledge was power, and power should never be shared with. INFERIOR Dr. Stephanie Moore was working in her research laboratory, surrounded by scientists from a dozen different species. They were developing medical technology that would extend lifespans for all races in the Alliance. The key insight came from studying ethereal biology, she explained to her team. Their gas giant environment forced them to develop incredible regenerative abilities. But they never thought to apply this knowledge to other species. Her assistant, a crystal being named Hex Ara, glowed with excitement. In the hegemony, each species was required to keep their biological secrets to themselves. Cross-species medical research was forbidden. That's why they never made breakthroughs like this, added Dr. Frank Wilson. They were so busy maintaining control that they forgot the point of having an advanced civilization. The medical breakthrough was announced simultaneously on every Alliance world. The treatment would be provided free to all citizens, regardless of species or origin. Even former hegemony soldiers would receive it. This generosity shocked many aliens who had spent their entire lives under hegemony rule. They couldn't understand why humans would help their former enemies. Commander Keshai was one of those who couldn't understand. He sat in a prison cell on New Geneva, the Alliance capital, waiting for his war crimes trial. He expected to be executed, as would have happened under hegemony law. Instead, he received a visitor. It was Jake Morrison, now an Alliance admiral. "I wanted to speak with you before your trial," Jake said, sitting down across from the alien. "Commander, have you come to gloat over your victory?" Keshai asked bitterly. "No, I've come to offer you a choice." Keshai's yellow eyes narrowed. "What kind of choice?" "You can stand trial for your crimes, accept your punishment, and then help us build a better galaxy. Or you can continue to hate us and spend the rest of your life in prison." "I do not understand." Jake leaned forward. "The Alliance needs people who understand how the hegemony operated. We need advisors who can help us avoid making the same mistakes. Your knowledge could prevent wars and save lives. You would trust a former enemy? We've learned that former enemies can become the most valuable allies. They understand what we're fighting against better than anyone." This conversation was happening all across Alliance space. Former hegemony officers, administrators, and scientists were being offered the chance to contribute to a new kind of civilization that not all of them accepted. Some preferred to remain in prison rather than work with humans. But many others chose to help build the future they wished they had lived in all along. The hegemony's final offensive came as a desperate attempt to restore their power. They gathered every remaining ship, every loyal soldier, every advanced weapon they still controlled. The target was Earth itself. "They're trying to cut off the head," observed Admiral Chris Taylor as he studied the enemy fleet movements. "If they can destroy Earth, they think the Alliance will collapse." Sarah Mitchell, now Supreme Commander of Alliance forces, shook her head. "They still don't understand us. Earth isn't our head, it's our heart. And even if they destroyed it, the Alliance would continue." The battle for Earth lasted 3 days. The hegemony threw everything they had at the human homeworld. But they faced something they had never encountered before: a truly united defense. Ships from dozens of species fought side by side to protect the human homeworld. Milari fighters darted between massive X-battleships. Corvin pilots flew alongside human aces. Even former hegemony soldiers who had joined the Alliance took part in the battle. "All ships, this is Admiral Taylor," Chris announced over the fleet communication system. "Today we fight not just for Earth, but for the idea that every species has the right to be free. Today we prove that cooperation is stronger than conquest." The battle's turning point came when hegemony ships began surrendering in the middle of combat. Alien crews who had been forced to fight were laying down their weapons and asking for protection. "Hegemony Cruiser Dominator is requesting permission to surrender," reported Communications Officer Chun. "They say their crew refuses to continue fighting." "Grant it," ordered Chris Taylor, "and offer them medical assistance for their wounded." This pattern repeated dozens of times during the battle. Hegemony forces found themselves fighting not just the Alliance fleet, but their own moral doubts about the war. On the planet's surface, the defense was equally impressive. Human civilians worked alongside alien refugees to coordinate evacuation efforts. No one was abandoned because of their species or origin. Former hegemony commander Keshai watched the battle from his prison cell. He had been given a communication. device so he could observe what happened to his former fleet. What he saw changed everything he believed about warfare and civilization. Why are they rescuing hegemony survivors? He asked his guard, a human soldier named Mark Lee. Because that's what civilized people do, Mark replied simply. We don't let people die just because they were our enemies. But we tried to destroy you. We enslaved your people. We showed you no mercy. That's exactly why we have to show mercy now. If we become like you were, then we haven't really won anything. The final hegemony assault was broken not by superior firepower, but by mass defections. Entire squadrons switched sides during the battle. By the end of the third day, more hegemony ships had surrendered and had been destroyed. The war was effectively over, but the real victory came in what happened next. Instead of demanding unconditional surrender, the Alliance offered negotiated peace. Instead of executing hegemony leaders, they offered trials and rehabilitation. Instead of enslaving former enemies, they offered partnership. The hegemony high council met for the last time in their ancient chamber on the capital world of Vorten Prime. They were no longer rulers of an empire. They were representatives of a single world, asking to join the Alliance. The terms are generous, reported the former council leader, now simply called Elder Vexka. Full membership in the Alliance, representation in the Senate, and protection under Alliance law. What do they want in return? Asked another elder. End to the caste system, equal rights for all species, and participation in the Alliance education programs. They want to change our entire way of life. Our way of life has already changed, Vexka pointed out. The question is whether we adapt or become irrelevant. The vote was close, but the hegemony's capital world officially joined the Terran Alliance. It was the end of 3,000 years of galactic empire and the beginning of something entirely new. Dr. Amanda Wells was working on her next project, exploration ships designed to reach other galaxies. The Alliance had grown to include over 300 star systems, but humanity's curiosity was already looking beyond their current borders. The new drives can take us to Andromeda in less than a year, she explained to the Alliance Science Council. We could make contact with entirely new civilizations. What if they're hostile? Asked a Milari scientist. Then we'll do what we always do, replied Amanda. We'll try to understand them, work with them, and show them that cooperation is better than conquest. Carlos Rodriguez had become the Alliance's Chief Technology Officer. He was developing new systems that combined the best ideas from all member species. The results were innovations that surpassed anything the hegemony had achieved in millennia. The secret is diversity, he explained to a group of engineering students. Every species sees problems differently. When you combine all those different perspectives, you can solve problems that seemed impossible. One of his students, a young Corvan named Zicto, raised her hand. Teacher Rodriguez, why didn't the hegemony understand this 25 years had passed since the first alien ships appeared near Jupiter? Claire Thompson, now in her 70s, stood before a gathering of young beings from across the galaxy. The auditorium on New Geneva was filled with humans, Vorthans, Milari, Vex, Corvans, and dozens of other species. When I was young, Claire began, her voice still strong despite her age, we thought the universe was a dark and dangerous place. We thought that to survive, we had to be stronger than our enemies. A young Vorthan in the front row raised his hand. Ambassador Thompson, my grandfather says humans were very weak when the hegemony first arrived. How did you become so powerful? Claire smiled. That's an excellent question, Keisha. The truth is, we never became powerful in the way your grandfathers. People understood power. We became something else entirely. She gestured to the mixed crowd of students. Look around this room. 30 years ago, most of your species had never met each other. Some of you were enemies. Today, you're classmates, friends, and partners in building the future. In the back of the auditorium, former Commander Keshai watched with amazement. His own grandson was sitting next to a human child, both of them taking notes and laughing. Together at some shared joke, the transformation had been incredible to witness. The galaxy that had once been ruled by fear and division was now connected by networks of cooperation, trade, and friendship. Admiral Danny Rodriguez was preparing for the launch of the first intergalactic expedition. His fleet consisted of ships, built by 12 different species, crewed by volunteers from across the Alliance. They would travel to the Andromeda Galaxy not as conquerors, but as explorers and ambassadors. Final systems check, Annie announced over the fleet communication system. All ships report ready for departure. The lead ship was called the Unity, and its crew represented the best of what the Alliance had achieved. The captain was a human, named Captain Lisa Park. Her first officer was a Melari engineer. The science officer was a former hegemony researcher who had joined the Alliance during the war. This is a historic moment, Danny continued. We go not to claim new territory, but to offer friendship to whatever civilizations we might encounter. We carry with us the hopes and dreams of 500 species. On the bridge of the Unity, Captain Park looked at her diverse crew. Each of them had volunteered for a mission that would take them millions of light years from home, with no guarantee they would ever return. Why did you volunteer for this mission? She had asked each of them during the selection process. The answers had been remarkably similar across all species. They wanted to share what they had learned. They wanted to show other civilizations that there was an alternative to conquest and oppression. They wanted to prove that cooperation could triumph over conflict. Back on Earth, the changes were just as dramatic as anywhere else in the galaxy. The blue planet that had once been a conquered world was now the unofficial capital of galactic civilization. But it was not a capital that ruled over others. It was a center that served others. The old United Nations building had been expanded into the Alliance Senate, where representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered to solve problems and plan for the future. The decisions made there were not imposed by force, but implemented through consensus and cooperation. Dr. Amanda Wells, now Director of Alliance Research, was working on projects that would have seemed like magic just a few decades earlier. Terraforming technology that could transform dead worlds into gardens. Medical treatments that could cure diseases across dozens of species. Communication systems that allowed instant translation between any two languages in the galaxy. The key to all of our advances, she explained to a group of visiting scientists, is that we stopped thinking of knowledge as something to be hoarded. When you share what you know, everyone benefits, including yourself. One of the visitors, a crystalline being from a newly contacted species, pulsed with curiosity. But how do you prevent others from using your knowledge against you? By making sure everyone has access to the same knowledge, Amanda replied. When everyone knows the same things, no one has an advantage through secrecy. The only advantage comes from using that knowledge wisely. This philosophy had transformed not just technology, but society itself. The old hegemony had been built on strict hierarchies where each species knew its place and stayed there. The Alliance was built on the idea that every being had unique talents and perspectives to contribute. Schools throughout Alliance space taught children to value differences rather than fear them. A typical classroom might include a dozen species, all learning from each other's unique ways of seeing the world. Maria Santos, now serving her 5th term as Alliance president, often visited these schools. The children always asked her the same question: what was it like when the aliens first came? Her answer was always the same: it was terrifying. We thought they were going to destroy us. We never imagined they would end up helping us become who we were meant to be. The old hegemony capital of Vorten Prime had been transformed into a museum and research center. Former enemies worked side by side to document the history of galactic civilization, ensuring that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. Elder Vexka, the former Hegemony Council leader, spent his days teaching young Alliance citizens about the dangers of authoritarian rule. His most popular lecture was titled, "How Good Intentions Can Lead to Terrible Results." The hegemony began with noble goals, he would tell his students. We wanted to bring order to the galaxy, to end conflicts between species, to create a unified civilization. But somewhere along the way, we forgot that order without freedom is just another form of chaos. The irony was not lost on him that he was now teaching principles that his former enemies had shown him. The humans had succeeded where the hegemony had failed, not through superior force, but through superior wisdom. Economic systems throughout the Alliance had evolved to ensure that no species or world was left behind. Trade agreements were designed to benefit all parties, not just the strongest. Resource-sharing programs made sure that basic needs were met everywhere, regardless of a world's natural advantages. The result was unprecedented prosperity. Even the poorest Alliance worlds had living standards higher than most hegemony core. Worlds had enjoyed at the Empire's peak, but perhaps the most remarkable change was in how conflicts were resolved. The Alliance had developed sophisticated mediation and arbitration systems that could settle disputes between species with completely different values and customs. Former Marine Colonel Tony Adams now ran the Alliance peacekeeping corps. Unlike traditional military forces, the peacekeepers were trained primarily as mediators, negotiators, and problem solvers. Our job isn't to impose peace, Tony explained to new recruits. Our job is to help people find peace for themselves. Sometimes that means standing between enemies, but more often it means sitting down with them and helping them understand each other. The recruitment poster for the peacekeeping corps showed beings from different species working together to rebuild a damaged city. The caption read, "Join us in building tomorrow." Art and culture had flourished under the Alliance system. Music that combined harmonic principles from dozens of species created sounds that no single race could have imagined. Literature that drew on the mythologies and philosophies of hundreds of worlds offered new insights into the nature of existence. The annual Alliance Cultural Festival was held on a different world each year, giving every member species a chance to share their traditions with the galaxy. The events were broadcast live across Alliance space, watched by billions of beings eager to learn about their neighbors. Children who grew up in this environment took diversity for granted. To them, it was perfectly normal to have friends who breathed different gases, communicated through different senses, or thought in ways their own species could barely comprehend. These children would grow up to solve problems that their parents' generation couldn't even imagine. They would explore new galaxies, discover new forms of life, and continue the great work of building bridges between different forms of consciousness. The first reports from the Andromeda expedition had begun reaching home. Captain Park and her crew had made contact with 17 different civilizations, most of which had never imagined that peaceful cooperation between species was possible. "They want to learn from us," Danny Rodriguez reported to the Alliance Senate. "Not our technology, but our methods. They want to know how we turned enemies into friends, how we built trust between species that had been fighting for thousands of years." The Senate voted unanimously to approve a massive exchange program. Alliance teachers, diplomats, and engineers would travel to Andromeda to help establish the first intergalactic democracy. In return, students and observers from the new galaxy would come to Alliance space to study their methods. "We're not just building a better galaxy anymore," observed President Santos. "We're building a better universe." As Claire Thompson concluded her speech,